Hi, my name is Rosie Robbins, and I'm going to tell you about my experiences with 9/11. My husband and I had just completed a transatlantic cruise. We docked into Boston, flew into LaGuardia, and we're very excited about going to New York City because the year before we'd bought an apartment and it was being renovated and furnished, and it was supposed to be ready to go, absolutely everything working. So, with great excitement, we landed on the 10th and we got to the apartment. And imagine our surprise when we got there. And yes, the refrigerator was there, it was not connected. The television was there, not connected. The landline was there, not connected. So you see where I'm going with this. Uh, my husband is not a person who can be any place without a television. He immediately said, "We're going home." We lived in Williamsburg. Um, and the other thing I'd like to tell you is that our oldest daughter was married at the World Trade Center on 109th floor of Windows on the World, the most beautiful restaurant. And in fact, you almost felt like that was the window to the world. You could see everything. And it happened to be a glorious day. It was so blue, so fabulous. Um, the blimps were flying because it's also the time for the U.S. Open. And so we were very excited and, of course, disappointed that nothing was working in the apartment. We called our children to tell them we were back in the U.S. And everything was fine. But you can't control things in your life, so we made the best of it. We went to a sidewalk cafe and had a lovely dinner, and it was wonderful. The next morning, I woke up. I am a walker. I went out and walked at Central Park, and I am telling you, it was a glorious day. It was wonderful. I came back with coffee for my husband, and we were sitting there talking, and the phone rings, and it's our oldest daughter who says, "Mom, are you okay?" I said, "No different than last night, darling. What's the matter?" She said, "Don't you know what's happened?" I said, "Well, no, we don't have a television set. We're just sitting here having coffee." She told us what had happened. We were astonished. I immediately said to her, "Well, obviously it was a small aircraft." She said, "Mom, they think it's terrorism." We were astounded. Why would anybody run into the World Trade Center? We'd heard of nothing of the other places. We just couldn't believe it. But about that time, a friend who was a master seamstress had come to do our draperies for the apartment. And she comes in and she says, "Do you know what's happened?" And we said, "Of course." And she says to my husband, "I've got an 11 o'clock flight that I've got to meet in LaGuardia." And John said, "If you don't get in a cab now, you're never going to make it." So we ran out to Third Avenue, and when we did, we are uptown on the Upper East Side, probably 5 to 7 miles from the World Trade Center site. And we could look in that direction and see the giant plume. There was ash falling, even as far away as we were. Joyce got in a cab, and she told us later that as the cab crossed the Triborough Bridge, she looked behind her uh, and saw policemen putting chains across the bridge. That was obviously one of the last cabs to cross out of Manhattan into Queens. And the cab driver took her to LaGuardia and asked her to hurry up because he had to go check on his family. She did. She got out, and as she reached the door to open up the terminal, a policeman came and said, "We are closed." And she said, "Well, my flight's in an hour." And he said, "No, ma'am, there's no flights going out." He pointed to a bus across the street and said, "That bus is taking people to Flushing, to the Y." She'd never been to New York before. She was so flustered and needed explanation that Flushing happened to be a city within Queens. And he said, "And it's leaving soon. If you expect to have any place to sleep tonight, you better get on the bus." So she ran over there with her little tote bag. By the time she got to the Y, they'd run out of beds. She spent the next 5 nights sleeping on the floor with strange people around her. John and I spent those days wondering what had happened. For us, life was, the only word I can use is surreal. Restaurants were open, stores were open, Manhattan was dark, no traffic, no buses, no trains, no subways. Just surreal is the only word I can use. As we were sitting in the sidewalk cafe, you would see people in suits, walking home, I assume, with their briefcases. The ladies had high heels in their hands, walking with sneakers. It was just surreal. Crazy time. We got back to the apartment without a television. John had gone out and picked up a radio, and so we had some news about that, but not much. We were not seeing anything that the rest of the world was seeing. So for us, it wasn't, I don't know what the word is, but we just heard about it. Later that afternoon, my son had a friend whose apartment was not too far away, and I walked over there, and I saw the replay of those buildings going down. I thought they were beautiful buildings. I remembered my daughter's incredible wedding there, and it's such a sad thing to contemplate, and it was just so difficult. Later, we heard about what had happened at the Pentagon and the flight that had crashed in Pennsylvania. We knew nothing about that. We were stuck in Manhattan it was about 5 days when they allowed rental cars to go out, no flights. So we rented a car and we drove home. About a month later, John had a board meeting in New York, and we decided to go. If you're used to the geographical area of Manhattan, it's standing right to the east is the East River, to the west is the Hudson. Our pilot took us on the east side, and I happened to be sitting by the window. And as I looked out, it occurred to me that Manhattan was almost like a birthday cake with all the incredibly tall buildings being the candles. And yet in the middle of it, it was as if someone had taken a spoon and scooped out that cake. Everybody was crying. It was unbelievable. Later in the week, we took a subway down there, and the flowers were still there. The tragic part was seeing the photographs that people would put on the wall that said, "Have you seen this person?" It was really so sad. And as you can see, it still touches my heart as it touched everybody's in the world. But we are survivors, and we got through it, and together we'll get through it. There may be other tragedies that we have to endure. That one was a big one. On that particular trip, we heard a New York Times columnist, his name is Tom Friedman, say, the reason this happened was a failure of imagination. The people in power at the FBI and the CIA and all these other groups that are trying to save us and help us, they could not imagine anybody wanting to hurt America. We are the first country that goes out with food or money or planes or ships, whatever anybody needs. The United States is there. How could they do that to us? I remember that first night, a newscaster saying that their 5-year-old little boy had said, "Mommy, why would anybody want to do that?" That's a good question. You don't know. And it's just a terrible thing that happened. Thank you.